Well, looks like the next Squid Game has been cancelled. This one opened with a kid and his disproportionately massive head dropping his rubber ducky toy. From there, Megatron's BFF got pushed and kicked around all over the place before ending up near a riverbed.
Oh god, we're going to get another pointless Toy Story sequel, aren't we?
Also, kind of clever transition here, having the foreground flowers be replaced with reeds to signify the passage of seasons. The duck would eventually be found by Peach while fetching a soccer ball, and okay, I wasn't that far off from the Toy Story stuff. No, obviously, it did have a little bit of the black light within it to give it sentience, but Peach couldn't pick up on any of the usual mouse, so he couldn't blow the whistle on it. Not that it stopped Chica from being a little creepy, as it did the usual baby duck thing and tried to follow its mom. And once again, I think the show might be borrowing a little more from Tom and Jerry, which in turn were kind of stealing from Disney.
Donald really kept himself busy in his heyday.
Anyway, Peach managed to evade Quackers, but would soon run into them again while retrieving some bath salts for the prof who had a rather massive collection of them from all over Japan. Well, okay, it does kind of make sense, as hot springs are very popular in the country, and okay, the duck is eating it.
Hey, don't look at me, I haven't said anything yet.
All I will say is that this foul version of Pikachu, yeah, they really liked the stuff, mostly because it did remind them of their time with their previous owner. As a result, it did kind of lead to an addiction to the salts to fill that empty void, which then led to becoming a monster when it filled up a little too much on the stuff.
Now, I'm not gonna outright say this is like some sort of drug PSA or something, but you could interpret it as a warning against overconsumption of really anything.
As ultimately, it did take Peach, who had formed a strong bond of friendship with the bird he had named Puyo, to try and save them after essentially being an enabler this whole time.
Plus, you know, this segment was written by Yumi Kageyama of Ojama Shotoremi fame, so would you really be all that surprised if there were a few more layers to it?
Also, maybe unintentionally, this episode also seemed to call back to Pet Feud from the OG, where the girls got a pet named Beeble that they were only supposed to feed once, but you know, since there's 3 of them, that didn't exactly work out, leading to the red Karibo becoming addicted to eating everything and everyone.
It was also one of the few monsters that the girls didn't actually defeat, but rather... Yeah, between that and the commercial for Yoshi's Island, children's media back in the day was kind of freaky.
Anyway, the girls confronted Puyo, and their sudden growth spurts, either the sea has some massive imbalance with its building sizes. And unlike Beeble, they did somewhat defeat them by essentially wringing the bath toy out like a towel.
Yeah, that's it. Defeat it by essentially making it purge itself of all of those bath salts. You know, I'm starting to realize the show is kind of weird.
In the process, it also released the black light within it, and yet, throughout all of this, Puyo never developed the aura of a monster, as, unlike others, it never recognized that it was being mistreated, even though I'm pretty sure this crow didn't give a damn about them. Still, the point is that Puyo managed to keep a positive attitude throughout all of this, reinforced by Peach befriending the little bird. It's actually a nice little tale about maintaining an amicable, childlike innocence, while also having a bittersweet ending to it, as Peach realized that Puyo would eventually need to return to its rightful owner, as well as reject the black light that was giving them sentience. So, on multiple fronts, the robot dog had to say goodbye to his little friend, but both could also recognize that they were with who they needed to be with.
Hey, if it makes you feel any better, just realize that duck had the Japanese dub voice of Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Yeah, you kind of dodged a bullet there, Peach.
The next story involved vegetables, specifically the 3 most unpopular bits of produce for kids in Japan: carrots, celery, and bell peppers.
Which honestly, I can kind of agree with. I mean, I don't mind these vegetables, but I also have never really cared for their textures. I don't like my food to be too rubbery or grainy. But what's y'all's opinion? Feel free to leave comments below and all that.
Granted, I do agree they're a little more edible with the right dressing, but I don't think you can pay me enough to drink one of the mayor's vegetable smoothies. Ew. But yeah, guess what the monsters were going to be for this one?
I don't remember Sausage Party playing out like this. Which, by the way, didn't that film also have a lot of bath salts?
Coincidence? I think not!
Anyway, some blacklight vegetables that somehow survived being cut up and sauteed into chop suey were upset that kids like Ken refused to eat them. This was so ridiculous that the star of the last story couldn't even pick up on any dangerous aura at first.
I mean, come on, unless it's a certain prank here, I don't think it's necessary to sound the alarm bells.
Anyway, the girls deployed, but couldn't face down their respective hated produce. This further rejection from kids convinced the VeggieTales gang to enact their next plan. All the while, the prof was lecturing his kids on this stuff.
A
few minutes later.
So yeah, after the emotional roller coaster of that last segment, we're essentially getting a Saturday morning PSA that also kind of parodies that stuff. You know, I'm starting to realize I kind of love the show.
But yeah, the plan of the Veggie Trio was to telepathically connect with all of their brethren across the planet and convince them to leave the ungrateful masses by going with them into space.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not as though we have a ton of other kinds of produce besides those three that could provide us with similar nutrition.
Really, all you have to do is tell me that if we lose the bell peppers, we'll ruin a joke from Cowboy Bebop, you know, more than Netflix already has. Anyway, as you can probably tell, all of this vegetables and space stuff likely draws from the Beat Your Greens episode of the OG. Granted, these three weren't alien invaders like the Broccoloids were, though they did need to be defeated in the same manner, as even after switching out opponents to cover up for their weaknesses, the numbers game overwhelmed the girls. Fortunately, the profs just so happened to have the tool to help them in a rocket for some reason.
Nah, personally I prefer ranch. French is just a little too sweet for me.
With their numbers significantly reduced, the girls managed to take down the veggie monsters and return them to normal. From there, I think they were permanently defeated by turning them into juice. And the episode ended with Ken partaking his vegetables in the worst way possible. Again, dressing would be good, or hell, at least ants on a log for the celery.
This was one of those episodes where I could say it was all over the place, and unironically say that was the best part of it.
The two segments felt like they could come from two different shows with their significant tonal differences, and yet they can also work well together with the imaginative world the show has created that can provide both ludicrous laughs and yet also some wholesome emotion.
For me, it's another good example of how this show just pretty much acknowledges that it's ridiculous, and it takes full advantage of what that brings to the table.
A subtle bit of world building I've come to appreciate is how the blacklight's effects seem to vary depending on the victim. In general, it gave inanimate objects sentience, but there was no guarantee that they'd become monsters as long as they didn't build malice through their own perceptions of mistreatment. I mean, it was pretty clear that Puyo wasn't exactly being treated the best by everyone, including his owner and Peach at first, but because they kept a positive attitude, they ended up becoming one of the more sympathetic antagonists the girls had to deal with, as they were likely unaware that they were causing that many problems. All the little duck knew was that it was lonely, and they tried to fill that void with bath salts. You could say it represented drugs or even food. Either way, it was a good tale, subtly telling how you shouldn't rely on destructive overconsumption to fix your problems, and that friends should consult them when they go down such a slippery path. And speaking of food, while nowhere near as thought-provoking, the evil VeggieTales gang was a fun interpretation of the Broccoloids, just for the insanity of it all. Again, I'm convinced they were at least poking a little fun at those after-school specials about eating your vegetables, while also suggesting effective ways of making them easier to eat. So overall, this was another fun episode with some surprisingly subtle messages. Sometimes you can make even those tagged on messages a little more digestible with a little dressing of creativity.
Work on the next part of the Simple Gear XV review is just about done, so it should be out by next week or so. For it, we'll cover episodes 5 through 9, which had some episodes and characters that I do want to talk about for better and for worse. Still look forward to it, and until then though, farewell for now my friends, and you want to know what's my personal favorite vegetable? Onions. Oh, not because of layers or anything like that, but because you can do this with it. Stop, you birds!